Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, CARES Act Imposes Fees and Submissions on Drug Industry. Are you complying? I'm proud to introduce our expert speaker today, Melissa Sayers. Melissa is Registrar Corp's Drug Division Manager, and she brings over a decade of expertise in analytical research. As the head of the Drug Division at Registrar Corp, she has nearly 15 years of guiding companies through complex filings and registrations. Her specialization lies in SPL and ECTD submissions to regulatory agencies across the globe, making her a trusted expert in navigating regulatory compliance. Throughout this webinar, feel free to write any questions in the Q&A box at the top of your screen, as we've saved time at the end to answer them. We'll also follow up with a link to the recording so you can refer back to this at any time. When the webinar closes, there will be a short survey for you to take about your experience. Without any further ado, Melissa, take it away.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. Good day, everyone. We will be going over in today's webinar the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, referred as the CARES Act. This act focused on helping mitigating shortages that greatly impacted many consumers within the United States during the pandemic. To help the Food and Drug Administration to keep a better eye on the drug supplies, a new reporting requirement was implemented, amount reporting of listed drug products. In this act, a user fee program for over-the-counter drug products marketed under a monograph was implemented. Let's dive deeper within each of these topics. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act was signed into law on March 27th of 2020. Within this act, aid was provided to small businesses and individuals who were unemployed due to the pandemic. This was the Economic Relief Stimulus Bill. To aid the public, the government provided access to COVID tests. Tests were mailed out as well as provided at various sites for the public to utilize. Education funding was also provided to the healthcare workforce. More related to our industry, requirements are implemented to help mitigate shortages for drugs that are life-supporting or life-sustaining, as well as an annual amount reporting requirement for drugs that are listed. The process for a monograph to be issued or revised has been reformed with an administrative order process instead of the cumbersome rulemaking process. In order to support these efforts, a user fee program has been implemented. How did this CARES Act come about? In December of 2019, people were getting sick at a rate, and not the usual light cold symptoms. By January of 2020, it was a worldwide pandemic that changed the course of many lives. For all of us, this is still pretty fresh in our minds, so I do not believe we really need to get into any details. For us, we never saw so many hand sanitizer listing requests. That was due to the shortage of the big brands experienced. Hand sanitizer was used at an alarming rate and was difficult to find. There was, of course, so much more that was in shortage. It was in March of 2020 that the CARES Act was signed. Close to a year after the signing of the CARES Act, OMUFA fees were published. January of 2021 was the first round of publications for user fees on the over-the-counter monograph drug manufacturers. FDA initially retracted the first notice after the hand sanitizer manufacturers, who were trying to help with the shortage, filed complaints on these user fees. FDA reissued the fees with the exemption for those who were manufacturing hand sanitizers as part of the public health emergency. FDA started to collect amounts of listed drug products in 2022, starting with amounts that were produced in 2020 and then 2021. Let's review some of the shortage highlights. Shortages affected all sectors, not only the drug industry. Medical devices were especially affected that were important to saving lives, such as personal protective equipment, masks, and ventilators. We already addressed how hand sanitizer supply was a drug that was heavily impacted during the pandemic. Then there was the food industry was affected, especially families with babies who needed formula. We are not going into this exhaustive list. The takeaway is the pandemic affected every industry. For drugs, the biggest shortage was the hand sanitizers. Distilleries were helping by manufacturing hand sanitizers. FDA was adamantly testing at the border because they were receiving adverse event reports where people were going blind or even dying, and it was identified that methanol was being produced instead of the other ethanol and isopropyl alcohol. So that was very dangerous to the public. So FDA was testing the products that was coming over the border to ensure that methanol was not getting onto the shelves. We take for granted what we have access to until we no longer have access. FDA's mission is not only aimed to make sure that the products under its regulatory authority is safe, but also is available, such as food, medical devices, and drugs. The pandemic was an awakening at how fragile the supply chain can be in a global setting. In the CARES Act, the requirement for certain drugs to be reported to FDA when there may be a temporary interruption or permanent discontinuous supply no longer applies to only finished drugs, but has been expanded to active pharmaceutical ingredients. In order for companies to know when they need to report, manufacturers are required to have on site a risk management plan to be able to access when a filing is necessary to the agency. For the agency to be able to monitor at a higher level, reporting the amounts manufactured within a calendar year is required for all listed drug products. So, who is required to notify the FDA of a supply change? A manufacturer of a drug that is either life-supporting, life-sustaining, or is intended for use in the prevention or treatment of a debilitating disease or condition, including any such drug that is used in an emergency medical care or during surgery. This also applies to any such drug that is critical to the medical health during a public health emergency as declared by the Secretary. Manufacturers are to report to the agency if there will be a permanent discontinuance of the drug or if there's an interruption in production that may lead to a meaningful disruption in the supply of the drug within the United States. FDA expects to be notified within 6 months when possible. Otherwise, it must be reported as soon as it is practicable, as there can be cases as interruptions, such as catastrophic events. These are not planned. So those sometimes have an immediate impact that will be sooner than 6 months. If a company does not inform the agency, FDA can issue a letter of noncompliance, a warning letter. A risk management plan is necessary for a manufacturer of a drug or medical device that is used for the preparation or administration in the drug that falls under the scope to report of a supply chain disruption. A plan must be able to identify risks to the supply and be able to evaluate the risks to determine when the risk is high enough to report to the FDA. Though these plans are not submitted to the FDA, it is important to have one on site as these documents are subject to inspection upon request. So, as we are seeing, the CARES Act is imposing more requirements on the drug manufacturers. On top of what we discussed, where more manufacturers with the inclusion of active pharmaceutical ingredients, more are required to monitor for disruption for supply. Manufacturers of drug products have been required to register its establishments with the agency since 1962. Upon registering, a facility is subject to an inspection by the agency at any time. This helped FDA know who is preparing and processing drug products. Then in 1972, FDA added a new submission type, requiring manufacturers to file product listings. This helped the agency know what drugs were on the market. Then came the digital age in 2009, where these submissions moved to an electronic system. In 2012, the Generic Drug User Fee Amendments was passed. This did not only impose a new user fee program on the applicant holders and manufacturers, but it also included a new filing requirement for the manufacturers of generic drugs. This submission type is called self-identification. It is required for manufacturers or intend to be manufacturers of generic drugs for the upcoming fiscal year. Manufacturers of generic drugs have an additional submission requirement. In August of 2016, 21 Code of the Federal Regulation Section 207 had an overhaul. It made it clear that establishments are to re-register between October 1st and December 31st. It also added a section that listings are to be recertified annually during this time frame. Previously, if a manufacturer did not have any changes to its listings, it could re-register its establishment and no further action was needed. Now, you also have to file a blanket no change certification selecting each product NDC number in a submission to recertify. Manufacturers have multiple submission annual requirements. With the CARES Act, another annual submission is now being added to the load. Manufacturers who are required to list now have to report amounts of each listed drug product annually. Let's dive deeper into this requirement. A new annual submission requirement for manufacturers of drug products, amounts of listed drug products. A company is required to report to FDA if it is a manufacturer of a listed drug, including an active pharmaceutical ingredient, finished drug, or a drug that requires further processing. It is required for both human and animal drugs per the CARES Act. FDA has stated in its final guidance reporting amount of listed drugs and biologic products under Section 510J3 of the Food and Drug Cosmetics Act that it does not intend to take action if a report is not filed if registrants whose only business operations in the drug listing file is sterilize, analysis, particle size reduction, or salvage. So we know we need to report amounts of listed drugs, but what is the actual data that needs to be submitted in these reports? Initially, when amount reporting started, there was one format. As of February last year, 2024, FDA has broken the amount report into 3 different templates based on the drug form. For products that are a bulk ingredient or for further processing excluding the capsules and tablets, you will use the API and APIs with ingredients template. Drugs for further processing in a capsule or tablet dosage form will use the finished product, not in finished form template. All others will use the finished drug template. Let's learn more about each of these templates. There are some commonality between the types. Each report will require including the manufacturer's establishment DUNS as it is filed in the listing SPL. Quantities will be reported by month and then an annual total in a column named amount per. Business operations selective. Even though the listing SPL includes more business operations, amount reporting has a short list of options that are accepted by FDA. These are manufacturer, repack, relabel, transpill, and positron emission tomography drug production. FDA advises to select the business operation that best describes the overall operation. Only if separate batches were only one operation and another batch a different operation, then you may report a listing with two different business operations as separate lines. Then, for FDA to identify the drug, the NDC number is required. Human drug products that are contract manufactured for a private label distributor are required to list under each company's label or code. Therefore, products can have multiple NDC numbers assigned to them. In those cases, FDA advises to report the same amounts so that the quantities are the same for the product for the multiple NDC numbers. This is the part companies may not be aware of when you hear amount reporting for an annual filing. One may think you report the annual total only. Manufacturers must track monthly amounts manufactured and then also provide the total for each listed drug product. For active pharmaceutical ingredients and active pharmaceutical ingredients with additional ingredients, they require further manufacturing, not in tablet or capsule form, are to report their quantities based on the mass or volume of the product. Let's dive more into the unit of measure. Previously, amounts were being reported off the package type. FDA has decided it was unnecessary and more informative to provide the overall mass or volume of the product. Certain active pharmaceutical ingredients, such as hormones or antibiotics, dosing may be expressed in terms of biological activity or effect. For the drugs that are measured by activity, the average activity and minimum activity will need to be provided. For each month, you will need to enter the average of all the batch activity for the average activity. You will also need to provide the minimum activity, which corresponds to the batch with the minimum activity for the month. Moving on to a different template type. Drugs for further processing that are in a capsule or tablet have the finished product not in finished form template. Amounts will be based on the quantity of capsules or tablets instead of the number of packages. Previously, a column, market unknown, in the old template has been changed to intended to fulfill 21 CFR Part 314, Section 81. What does this mean? This column is intended for drugs that are marketed under a new drug application or abbreviated new drug application. Application holders are required to file annual reports that include distribution data. The amount reporting can be used as an alternative method. Quantity distributed is a section that will include the amounts to report distribution data. When a drug is marketed under an application, and if it is desired to use it for the amount reporting for reporting distribution amounts, then the reporter would select yes for intended to fulfill 21 CFR Part 314, Section 81. When yes is selected, then the reporter would need to report amounts for quantities distributed outside the United States. If the amount reporting will not be used to report distribution amounts for drugs that are marketed under an application, or the drugs are marketed without an application, such as monographs or unapproved drugs, then the reporter would select no for intended to fulfill 21 CFR Part 314, Section 81, and no quantities would be required. You could report 0 for quantities distributed outside the United States. So here's the third template for finished products in a finished form. It's similar to the original template for amount reporting, though there are some changes to the template. One term FDA has changed is released is now manufactured. It is the finished product in finished form template that amounts will be based on the package type. If there are multiple levels of packaging, amounts will be requested for the outermost package level and the innermost package level. If there is more than one level of packaging, then amounts will be reported for the outermost section. Sorry, if there's only one level of packaging. For kits, FDA advises to report amounts only for the outermost level, okay? So you don't report amounts for the inner kit components, only the kit level. Since the onset of the amount reporting from FDA, it has had quite the varying recommended timeframes to file amounts to the agency. Amount reporting became available to industry to file in 2021. The first round of reporting started with filing amounts for calendar years 2020 and 2021. So FDA recommended industry to file amounts for calendar year 2020 by February 15th in 2022, and file for calendar year 2021 by May 16th in 2022. Originally, the recommended deadline was February 15th for the previous calendar year. That stayed true until 2023, when FDA issued the final guidance to industry on reporting amount of listed drugs and biological products under Section 510J3 of the Food, Drug, Cosmetic Act on February 26th in 2024, last year, after the reporting deadline for the calendar year 2023. In this guidance, FDA changed the reporting template from one into the three versions we went over, and extended the recommended deadline for reporting calendar year 2023 from February 15th to July 31st in 2024. This was to help industry who have not filed time to adjust to the new templates to file their reports. The guidance also changed the recommended deadline from that point forward to March 31st. So for reporting amounts for calendar year 2024, the recommended deadline is March 31st of this year. This helps industry to file with a little more time after the renewal period for its establishment registration and certifying its drug listings. We have learned a lot about the CARES Act. To recap, the CARES Act provided means for the agency to help prevent shortages in drugs by requiring certain manufacturers of drugs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, and medical devices to report when there may be a temporary or permanent interruption to supply. These manufacturers are also required to keep risk management plans on site that can be reviewed during an inspection. A requirement that affects more of the drug industry is the amount reporting for all who are required to list drug products. This submission is required to be filed with the agency annually, recommended to be submitted by March 31st for the previous calendar year. Amounts are to be reported by each calendar month and then an annual total for each MDC number. The type of data that will be filed is dependent on the listing type and dosage form for the drugs, not in finished package form. For products that are marketed under an application type, you can use this reporting as an alternate means to file distribution data that would otherwise be included in the annual report. A decent amount has been put onto the drug industry since the enactment of the CARES Act in 2020. But wait, there is more. CARES Act also included the over-the-counter Monograph drug user fee program that brought on a reform to the Monograph process and implements user fees for over-the-counter Monograph drug products. Let's take a moment, review some of the agency's history. Can you envision a time where anyone could sell anything, whether it was safe or even effective? That posed a serious risk that made people ill and sadly even resulted in death. Congress signed into law the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 1938 that required all new drugs must demonstrate safety, that they were safe to take. That was the first step to help protect the public. However, some drugs require more expertise in administering or ensuring it is being used appropriately. In 1951, the Durham-Humphrey Amendment was the first step in distinguishing between over-the-counter and prescription use. However, even if a drug may not make you sick or kill you per se, it was not beneficial to take medications that were not effective. By not receiving care to help treat an ailment, that comes at a price as well. So in 1962, the Kefauver-Harris Amendment was passed that revised the new drugs did not only need to demonstrate that they were safe, the drug has to be effective as well. FDA was receiving a lot of applications. A pattern was recognized of products that could be classified as generally safe and effective, known as GRACE, that may not require an application to be filed for every unique product. The over-the-counter drug review was passed in 1972. That allowed FDA to follow a three-step rulemaking process to create monographs. Monographs allow industry to market drug products without filing an application for approval to market. However, the agency has lacked the resources to manage the monographs, and it took a long time to go through the rulemaking process. So here we are in the 2020s with the reformed monograph process and user fees to help fund the FDA to modernize the monograph. Let's dive into the over-the-counter monograph user fee program. There are many products on the market that consumers can purchase off the shelf that are marketed under a monograph. Sunscreens, toothpaste, hand sanitizer, antacids, topical antifungals, antiperspirants, cold and allergy medications, diaper rash, and laxatives. And of course, there's more. What is a monograph? A monograph will include what active ingredients can be used to treat, prevent, or mitigate a disease. The monograph will also include the acceptable dosage range and combination of active ingredients. Monographs will also indicate what route of administration that the drug may be used, such as topical or oral. The monograph will also have requirements to the labeling, such as the format and text for the drug specs panel. For some, like sunscreens, monographs may include testing requirements to be able to make certain claims, such as the SPF value. Why was this reform to the monograph process so necessary? Prior to 2020, FDA had to create or modify a monograph through a lengthy three-phase public rulemaking process by first proposing a rule, review all the feedback, comment on the feedback. It may take a long time for FDA to be able to do so, and then issue a final rule. It did not allow for quick action. So if there was a change that is necessary to protect the public health, it didn't have a mechanism to do so. Now, with the user fee program in place, there is a mechanism for monographs to be issued in a shorter or an expedited route with the administrative order process. FDA can initiate an order through an expedited procedure that puts it immediately into effect for a drug that poses an imminent hazard to public health, or a change in labeling of a drug, class of drugs, or combination of drugs that is reasonably expected to mitigate a significant or unreasonable risk of serious adverse event associated with the use of the drug. The public will still have an opportunity to provide comment. With the new monograph process, industry can actually initiate an order through the OTC monograph order request, also referred as an OMR filing. Depending on the type of request, a fee may apply. The user fees collected under this program helps FDA to provide more resources to keep the monograph relevant and not as antiquated. This is an amazing opportunity for industry to initiate change to a monograph. If industry has a request to change an existing monograph or consider a new monograph, industry files an OMAR. Data to support the request may be needed. A fee may incur depending on the type of OMAR. FDA looks it over to determine first if it meets the requirements to be considered review. If it meets the requirements, FDA will review and then issue a public order. There will be a period for comment for the public, and then FDA reviews the comments and then issues a final order. So I've been mentioning fees. User fee programs is not a new concept. For drugs marketed under a new drug application, applicants have been paying fees to FDA since 1992 under the Prescription Drug User Fee Amendments, PDUFA. When a new drug application is filed, the applicant can pay between, right now, it's about $2 to $4 million, depending on whether clinical data is needed. After an application is approved, an applicant pays an annual fee to FDA, which currently is about $416,000 every year. For products marketed under an abbreviated new drug application, also referred as generic drugs, there is the Generic Drug User Fee Amendments, similar to PDUFA. It is called GDUFA. This has been around for over 10 years. I remember when this was passed Congress. The difference with this program is the addition of user fees incur on the manufacturers of generic drugs. This fee has a big range, from $40,000 to $235,000. Now, we have the over-the-counter monograph drug user fee program, where manufacturers are also incurring an annual fee that's between $23,000 to $34,000 for this past fiscal year. Each year, for all these user fee programs, these fees are adjusted based on the size of industry and inflation rates. So why does industry market under an over-the-counter monograph? It does not require filing an application, which takes time, lots of money when you file. OMARs are not required to file to market an over-the-counter monograph drug product. The annual facility fee, it is a new requirement that otherwise industry did not have to pay prior to 2020, but it's still the lower fee compared to the other programs. So under OMUFA, who is subject to facility fees? If a manufacturer of a monograph drug product is only processing active pharmaceutical ingredients, these sites will not incur an OMUFA facility fee. There are exemptions for a finished drug manufacturer if they are only placing a product into an outer packaging, producing clinical supplies, or conducting testing. If the facility does not fall under this exemption, then it needs to determine which facility fee will it incur. There are two types. If the manufacturer is producing a drug product that is marketing under its company name or brand, then it is a own label manufacturer that will incur the monograph drug facility fee, an MDF fee. If the site is only manufacturing drug products for another company, not under any common ownership, that'll have its own company name on the label, it's known as a private label distributor, then the manufacturer is a contract manufacturing organization. Okay, and they're going to incur the contract manufacturing CMO fee that is 2/3 of the monograph drug facility fee. In other words, the contract manufacturers pay 1/3 less than those that own the product, the monograph drug facility fee. So we discussed who incurs the fee. When does the OMUFA facility fee incur on a site? So fees incur the following year when the site has registered and listed drug products. Let's go over some scenarios. If a facility registers today and lists drug products that are marketed this year, then the facility will incur the facility fee in 2026 in June. If a facility was registered last year and deregistered by the end of the year, delisted its products, it will still incur the fee this coming fiscal year publication for 2025. That'll be due in June. So even though they're not actively registered now, they still incur the fee this year. When a facility is registered last year and they re-registered this year, they will incur the facility fee for this year in 2025, and they will incur the fee next year for 2026. Okay, so kind of how that works. We anticipate that the fee will be announced by FDA either in March or at the latest in April. When the fee is announced, we do reach out to the industry and let them know, and we're here to provide assistance. The biggest addition was the OMUFA program that came out of the CARES Act. Let's review briefly what this meant. This program reformed the process for monographs through an administrative order versus the rulemaking process that now allows also industry to also initiate a monograph order. Fees are now incurred to industry to help support FDA with the initiative for over-the-counter monograph drug products. Fees incur on some of the OMAR applications that are filed. An annual fee now applies to manufacturers of finished packaged drugs. Before we go into our Q&A, we want to highlight the various compliance services we offer, as well as the wealth of master file services we offer and online training to help expand your knowledge base. There are so many requirements on the drug industry, and we really do specialize a lot with these submissions. We also help with assistance with communication with the FDA, DUNS issues, export certificates if there's an issue at the border. We have detention assistance. We do a lot. And what's really neat about our master file service, we have that, we filed to multiple different agencies from not just United States FDA, but Health Canada, multiple European agencies, China's agency, NMPA. We filed, Australia, even TGA. So we have a lot of expertise here at Registrar Corp. Online training offerings we have feature GMPs, the different marketing pathways, not just with the US FDA, but also Europe. And we also have a nice course on part of the section, the CFR, about electronic records and signatures. Registrar Corp is a trusted compliance partner to more than 32,000 customers in over 190 countries. With 20 plus years in the business due to the 462 plus years of regulatory expertise in our company. We provide 27 services and software solutions to help the industries, drugs, medical device, cosmetics, food, etc., be compliant globally. We are also the only one that is ISO 27001 certified, ensuring that your data is secure when you choose us as your compliance partner. We appreciate you joining us today. Make sure to take the survey. We have a few moments for questions. Just one moment once we review the questions and we'll answer some of them. Right. So I have, let's see. Okay, so I have one question regarding labeling facilities that are not manufacturing or selling OTC drugs. Would they still incur an OMUFA annual facility fee? So labeling is a function of manufacturing, and it would fall under being subject to the OMUFA fee. This is a good question. If you work with a contract manufacturer to make your product private label, just the contract manufacturer pays the OMUFA fee. So that's correct. The OMUFA fee is applied to those who are manufacturers. So private label distributors do not pay the OMUFA fee. So here's a question. Does the facility, a third-party manufacturer, pay a separate fee for each NDC? So the way, I'm assuming that's for OMUFA. So the OMUFA is a facility fee based. So it's not based on the number of products the facility makes. So if a facility is manufacturing over-the-counter monograph drug products and it doesn't fall under the exemptions we discussed, like placing an outer level of packaging, conducting clinical studies, then the facility, if it's handling a drug product, manufacturing it, it would incur one of the fees. And that kind of is a good point, is if a facility is manufacturing, products for its company as well as being a contract manufacturer, you would only incur one fee, and it would be a higher fee, the monograph drug facility fee, MDF. So very important point that the OMUFA, it's facility based and not based on the number of NDCs. Oh, this is a good one. What is the difference between pack and repack? So pack is when you take a drug and you pack it into like the first level. So if I take a bulk, let's say active pharmaceutical ingredient, and put into its finished packaging, that would be pack. Repack is taking something out of its original container and placing it into a new container. So you're changing the packaging from one to the other is the biggest difference. FDA does a great job of explaining it in the 21 CFR section 207.1. So they have a really good definition to help explain that in that respect, what repack is. In both cases, the repack part is if it gets the problem with OMUFA is you have this exemption of placing an outer layer, but there's no business operation to identify those. And what we see sometimes is companies may have to clarify that to FDA if it's not clear to them in the data they have to be exempted from the fee. So it's not uncommon where FDA may issue an invoice, company may need to explain what their operation is, clarify it, And then at that point, when they clarify and the information justifies it, then FDA takes the fee off. But repack it could also be used in those circumstances. And if you're repacking where it's not just that outer level, like when they're assembling kits, for example, you could be subject to the OMUFA fee. So here's the question is, are all sunscreens subject to OMUFA? So as long as the sunscreen, you have to know what your product is being marketed under. If it's being marketed under Monograph, it's going to be subject to OMUFA. If your product is being marketed through a drug application, new drug application or abbreviated, then it would be subject to the corresponding user fee program. If applicable, there may or may not be fees. So to say that all sunscreens, I can't make that exact claim. It's really knowing, and this is for any product, it's super important to know how is your product being marketed? What pathway? Does your company have an application? Whoever you're contract manufacturing for, do they have an application, or are they marketing through by following the Monograph, the regulations? The order now used to be regulations, now it's the orders. But it's super, super important to know that when you're handling products, where is your product going? How is it being used? What regulations you may be subject to. So here's a good one. For APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, what do we report for amounts? We always report it based on the number of drums that our API is packaged in. It seems that is no longer the case. So that's a great question. Because of the changes the FDA implemented last February, now we don't have one template, it's 3 templates. And for active pharmaceutical ingredients, the amounts that you're going to report are going to be based on the mass or volume you produced of that drug that month, and then total it up for the annual year. So you don't no longer have to report it based on the drums, but the volume or mass of the API that was produced for that calendar year. That is a big change. And this may be news for some companies in respect to that. If you filed your amount reports previously before the February 15th deadline, before they made the changes in the systems, you may have reported 2023 by drum quantities. Now moving forward, how you calculate and report to FDA are going to be different numbers, because the numbers the FDA is asking for, the type, is going to be different. And that's also the case for products that are for further processing that are in capsules or tablet form. You're going to be reporting the number of capsules or tablets, no longer the package, based off the package type. Does FDA issue an invoice so you know if you have to pay the fee in advance? So FDA does not issue an invoice in advance. They expect industry to know whether or not they owe the fee. FDA typically sends out an invoice maybe a month or 3 months after, it depends, after the fee is due. And if that's the case, if you don't pay the fee on time, the FDA publishes a public arrears list. So the arrears list lists all companies that owe a user fee program. And each user fee program, they have a list for their respective fees. And what that means is your company is no longer compliant with the FDA. It can take further action. If you're trying to import products, it could be stopped. And the thing is, we've seen it where if companies don't pay it on time, they started with OMUFA incurring interest. So now you don't just have the initial fee. Over time, that fee gets larger. So it's important to know the type of products you're handling, whether the facility can be subject to the OMUFA fee, and to prepare accordingly. Unfortunately, with the way this user fee program sets up, is you can register. There's no invoice. There's no warning that your facility will be subject to this fee. And some companies could be registering right now, don't think about it, and then next year get an invoice from the FDA that you owe this, $20,000 to $30,000 fee. So it's very important to know what the requirements are, and that's where Registered Corp is here to help you. Here's a good question. Are there any benefits to continuing to report distribution data in an annual report rather than as part of the CARES Act reporting? It's not really a benefit. It might be depending on how some companies have things set up. If they have a contract manufacturer, for example, and they're doing their MAT reporting for listings, maybe for a contract manufacturer scenario, it might be beneficial because then they can report the amounts they manufactured, amounts distributed, and then the applicant holder for the drug application does not have to include that in your annual report. So if you are the applicant holder and you are manufacturing drug products, in that scenario, you have to file an annual report for your application anyway. If you want to file, continue that way, that's fine. Either way is acceptable as long as FDA is getting that distribution data. It's all good. I feel that, it's just my opinion, knowing the different cases, it might be beneficial for those who have contract manufacturers that may want to utilize the alternate means for reporting. So this question is, we've registered our company that's going to have Monograph drug products last year, but plan to launch our products this summer. Could you tell us if we should pay the OMUFA fee this year? So I can't say for sure. When a facility registers, it can be subject to the fee the following year. If you listed drug products, depending on what you reported to the FDA, if you reported a start marketing date that indicates that the product's going to be marketed last year, your facility could very well be subject to the facility fee this year. If you registered last year, listed drug products that indicate that marketing does not start until this year, there may be a possibility FDA may not incur the fee on your facility. What I recommend, what Registered Corp recommends, is when it comes to these specific scenarios, the center at FDA does a great job at helping with this. The email address is CDER, C-D-E-R, collections at fda.hhs.gov. And in these cases, it's helpful to ask FDA, get clarity. That way you don't end up on the arrears list. You can plan beforehand, or, if you have to fix something, you can fix it or whatever. They're really helpful, that center. Really appreciate them. So, in those cases, I do recommend to reach out so there's no surprises versus playing the wait and see game. You can find out, get clarity. But FDA goes off the data they have to determine who's going to incur the fee. So without knowing whether or not the products, what the marketing dates are, it really depends what was filed and how it appears to the FDA on whether or not they're going to issue and expect that fee to be paid. For any questions, if you want to reach out to us, there's an email address on the slide, info@registercourt.com. You can reach out here. We'll be happy to answer. I have one question here asking how to contact us. Our information is right on the slide that's showing. Contact us here. We'll be happy to answer. All right, so this is going to be the last question for today. Under the CARES requirement, must manufacturers report production information only for products marketed and distributed in the U.S., or for all production, irrespective of where marketed? So when reporting for the manufactured section, or quantities in general, FDA wants to know how much is being produced. So manufactured is how much product is being manufactured at your facility and being released, regardless if it's going to the U.S. or not. So that answers that part. The distributed column, just as a reminder, it has to do with the distribution data requirement for those that hold drug applications, new drug applications, NDAs or ANDAs. They have an annual report that they have to file every year with the FDA, and there's a section on their distribution data. So the distributed non-US column is really for those. So for companies that are manufacturing drugs that are not marketed under an application, the distribution would be 0. You report the amounts that you produced in the main column. Okay. Great question. All these are great questions. If we didn't get to answer your question, will we, follow up? Feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help, and there is so many services we do offer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Just another reminder, please fill out the survey. We appreciate your feedback.